Normally, somewhere around 90 ships a day cross the Strait of Hormuz. Lately, some days it's been closer to 10. That's a stretch of water 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Something like 1 in every 5 barrels of oil on the planet has to sail through it to get to you. Right now, most days it's basically empty, and every day it stays that way, you pay for it. At the pump, at the grocery store, on your credit card statement. Here's the thing about 2026, it feels a lot like 2008. Same panic. Same, how did nobody see this coming energy? Except in 2008, the Fed had a superpower. It could just slash rates and ride to the rescue. In 2026, that superpower might not be available. So what actually happens when the emergency button doesn't work? Let's find out. Why 2008 is the comparison. 2008 wasn't really a story about houses. It was a story about leverage nobody could see. Banks bet on mortgages. Then they bet on bets on those mortgages. Then they bet on bets on the bets. It's a little like texting your ex at 2 in the morning and telling yourself it's just checking in. Everyone around you can see exactly where this is going. You cannot. That's what hidden leverage does. It buries risk inside more risk. Layer after layer, until one weak link snaps and drags the whole chain down with it. Here's the thing about 2008. Though, once that chain snapped, the Fed still had one big move left. Cut rates. Flood the system with cheap money. Buy everyone time to work out the damage. It was slow. It was painful. But it worked. 2026 has the hidden leverage. 2026 has the blind confidence too. Record stock prices, everyone insisting the good times keep rolling. What it might not have is that same emergency move. And that gap is basically the entire video. The war. Let's talk about the war you probably stopped thinking about. Back in February, the United States and Israel launched strikes on Iran. Iran struck back, and it escalated into a full-blown regional war. It is still, right now, one of the deadliest conflicts in decades. For the people living through it, this isn't a headline. It's their lives, and that's worth sitting with for a second before we get to spreadsheets. For the rest of us, watching from a safe distance, it faded from the front page months ago. That's normal. That's just how attention works. But here's the part nobody's talking about. The war never actually stopped moving your wallet. It just stopped trending. Iran's move on the economic side was simple. Choke off the Strait of Hormuz. That's the waterway between Iran and Oman we opened on. Roughly a fifth of the entire world's oil supply has to sail through that one narrow gap. Shutting it down isn't like closing one gas station down the street. It's more like closing the only road into an entire city and calling it a detour. The International Energy Agency called it the largest disruption to global oil supply it has ever recorded. Not a bad one. The biggest one. Ever. Oil prices reacted exactly the way you'd expect. Brent crude, the benchmark price the rest of the oil market follows, rocketed from around $70 a barrel before the war to past $120 at its worst points. That's a jump of nearly 70%. There have been ceasefires since then. There's even been a signed agreement aimed at reopening the strait for good. But that's not even the scary part. As of the last few days, it's flared back up again. Fresh strikes, tankers hit in the strait. The temporary shutdown of one of the most important waterways on the planet keeps not staying temporary. Think of it like a couple who keep getting back together, then breaking up again 3 weeks later, insisting every single time that this round is different. Everyone outside the relationship can see the pattern. The people inside it keep acting surprised. And every time this one flares back up, oil gets more expensive, which means shipping gets more expensive, which means basically anything that ever touched a truck, a ship, or a plane gets more expensive too. Which brings us to the part you actually feel. The inflation. You know that feeling when a price goes up temporarily and then it just never comes back down? That's not your imagination. That's basically been the entire economy since 2020, in one sentence. Inflation has been running hotter than the Fed's own target for more than 5 years now, half a decade. At this point, that's not a blip. That's a personality trait. Then the war happened, and it made an already annoying problem meaningfully worse. Here's the thing about oil. It's not just what goes in your gas tank. It's in the plastic on the shelf, the fertilizer on the farm, and the diesel in the truck that gets your groceries to the store in the first place. Goldman Sachs estimated that higher fertilizer costs alone, driven by the war, could push food prices up by around 1.5% this year. Just fertilizer. One ingredient in one corner of a very long supply chain. Now stack that on top of tariffs that were already pushing prices up. Stack that on top of energy that was already expensive before a single missile flew. And here's the part nobody's talking about. None of these are one-time bumps anymore. They're layers. Each new shock sits on top of the last one, and the layer underneath doesn't politely step aside just because a new one showed up. It's less like a single spike on a chart, and more like your rent going up every single year whether your paycheck does or not. So if you feel like your grocery total just never went back to what it used to be, you're not imagining it. You're not the only one either. Right now, the honest answer to when does this end is closer to define end. The divided Fed. Okay, this next part might be the best plot twist in the entire video, so stick with me. Picture this. You spend over a year publicly trashing the head of the Federal Reserve. Too slow, too stubborn, too attached to keeping rates high. So when his term is up, you handpick the replacement, somebody who's been openly critical of the Fed's whole approach for years. That somebody is Kevin Warsh. Back in 2006, he was the youngest person ever appointed to the Fed's Board of Governors. He sat right next to Ben Bernanke through the entire 2008 crisis and watched the emergency toolkit get built in real time, under fire. In January 2026, Donald Trump nominated Warsh to replace Jerome Powell as Fed chair for one very specific, very publicly stated reason: to cut rates. Here's the thing about that plan. It did not go the way anyone expected. The Senate confirmed Warsh in a 54-45 vote, the closest, most divided confirmation for a Fed chair in the modern era. Half of Washington was furious before he'd even taken the oath, and once he was actually in the chair, he didn't cut. Warsh's Fed has now held interest rates steady, in a range of 3.5 to 3.75% for 5 meetings in a row. That's the longest stretch without a move since the run-up to the 2008 crisis itself. But that's not even the scary part. At the July meeting, 3 of the Fed's own regional presidents broke ranks and voted against the decision, not because they wanted a cut, because they wanted a hike. Sit with that for a second. The man installed specifically to make borrowing cheaper is now getting pressure from inside his own building to make it more expensive. Asked about the split afterward, Warsh just shrugged it off and called it, quote, a good family fight. Cute way to describe the most divided vote in modern Fed history. Twice, in the same year. Bond markets didn't find it quite so charming. The 30-year Treasury yield jumped to its highest level since 2007, and the betting markets have absolutely noticed. More than one now has the odds of a rate hike in September sitting above 65%. Some have it past 80. Not a cut. A hike. In the middle of an economy already dealing with a war-driven price shock. The guy Trump installed to make your loans cheaper might be about to do the exact opposite. The missing ingredient. So here's the actual thesis of this whole video. In 2008, when everything fell apart, the Fed had exactly one giant lever to pull. Cut rates, make money cheap, let cheap money patch the hole. In 2026, the Fed can't just yank that same lever. The thing causing the pain right now, a literal war driving up oil and food prices, gets worse if you cut rates and flood the system with cheap money. Cheap money means more spending. More spending on top of a supply shock means more inflation, which is the exact opposite of what anyone actually wants right now. It's like trying to put out a grease fire with water. The tool that usually saves the day is the one tool that makes this particular fire worse. Here's the part nobody's talking about. The Fed isn't the only one who's out of room. The national debt is closing in on $40 trillion, on pace to cross that line sometime this fall. Just the interest on that debt, not the principal, just the interest, now runs close to $1 trillion a year. That's more than the entire US defense budget. just to service debt that already exists. But that's not even the scary part. This summer, the Bank for International Settlements, basically the central bank for the world's central banks, published its annual report. It specifically flagged something it called an AI capex bust, paired with what it called circular financing, as one of the top risks to the entire global financial system. Circular financing sounds complicated. It isn't. Company A gives Company B money. Company B uses that money to buy stuff from Company A. Then everyone points at the resulting revenue and says, "Look how much demand there is." It's basically the corporate version of writing yourself a check and calling it income. Nvidia alone is reportedly working on AI infrastructure deals worth more than $750 billion. That includes a possible $250 billion backstop just to help one company, OpenAI, lease computing power for a single data center project. Sound familiar? It should. It's the same basic shape as 2008. Hidden leverage, wrapped in enough complexity that almost nobody outside the deal fully understands where the actual risk is sitting. Except this time, it's not hiding in mortgages. It's hiding in server racks. And here's the detail that should make you sit up straight. Some of the most plugged-in people in the industry are quietly getting out. Peter Thiel's fund sold off its entire Nvidia position. Michael Burry, the investor who famously shorted the housing market before 2008, currently has more than $1 billion riding on AI stocks going down. These aren't randoms on the internet with a hot take. These are people who've built entire careers on spotting the exit before everyone else finds the door. And it's not just them second-guessing the picture. Even the labor market can't make up its mind. The most recent jobs report showed the economy adding just 57,000 jobs, way below what was expected, while unemployment actually ticked down to 4.2%, which sounds great, until you learn that's mostly because people are leaving the workforce rather than finding jobs. Two surveys in the same report telling two different stories. The stock market's just as confused. This has been one of the best corporate earnings seasons in years, with something like 85% of companies beating expectations and profits climbing more than 20%. And yet, the Nasdaq has still slid into correction territory, down around 10% from its June peak, while Wall Street's own fear and greed gauge sits stuck in the fear zone. Great fundamentals, bad mood. That contradiction alone tells you something's off. Even gold, the asset that's supposed to be the boring, calm, safe haven, hit an all-time high above $5,500 an ounce back in January, then corrected more than 25% since. If the safe trade can't sit still this year, that tells you something too. What could actually happen? So, is this just 2008 all over again? Honestly, nobody actually knows. But here are the 3 honest ways this could go. Scenario 1. It fizzles out. The war cools off for real this time. Oil settles down and the Fed finally gets room to breathe. The AI spending turns out to be aggressive, not fake, and revenue eventually grows into it. Markets panic, then unpanic. It's happened before. Scenario 2. It's a slow grind. Nothing breaks all at once. Instead, you get years of stickier prices, a Fed stuck between inflation and growth, and an AI sector that quietly disappoints without ever technically popping. Less a crash, more a long, annoying hangover. Scenario 3. It's the real thing. The war reignites hard enough to send oil spiking again. The Fed hikes into a slowing economy. And some circular AI deal turns out to be load-bearing for a company that was supposedly too interconnected to fail. All 3 of those are genuinely plausible, and nobody, not the Fed, not Wall Street, not the guy on your timeline with the chart and 17 exclamation points, can tell you with real confidence which one we're getting. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how this ends is selling you something. Remember that strait we opened on? The one that's supposed to carry something like 90 ships a day and lately barely carries 10? It's still sitting there, mostly empty, still waiting on a ceasefire that keeps almost holding. That's kind of where all of us are right now, honestly. waiting to see if this settles down quietly or if it's the first domino. 2008 taught the world that the scariest risks are the ones nobody's watching. 2026 is testing whether we actually learned that lesson or just got better at hiding the leverage. So here's the one question I actually want your honest take on in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of thing I'll keep tracking the second it moves. Does the Fed hike in September or blink and hold one more time? Pick a side. I'll see you in the comments.